Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream here from Empty Cloud Monastery. This evening, as usual, we'll start with a period of meditation practice, after which I'll give a Dhamma talk, this evening talking about emptiness, and then I'll take any questions you have at the end of the talk. After the meditation, you're welcome to put in questions at any time relevant to the topic, and I'll answer them after the talk. For now, please go ahead and get in an upright sitting position. So settling into meditation posture. And once you're in position, make a resolution to let the body remain still for the entire period of meditation. So beginning with taking a few long, slow, deep breaths. With each breath, letting the body and mind relax. Letting all the thoughts and memories and ideas fall away. Starting by just enjoying the present moment, enjoying the feeling of being right here, right now, with this body, mind. With nothing to do, nothing we need to plan, nothing we need to remember. There's no one we need to impress. There's nothing we need to be concerned about. We can just put down the past and future completely for a period of time. Focus attention on your body, clearly feeling your whole body. And choosing a place in the body to center the mind. Perhaps at your hands or your abdomen. Just choosing some clearly defined place to be the still center point of attention. Just as a person sitting at the top of a watchtower can see the whole land around them without moving from that tower. In the same way, you choose a place in your body to seat the mind. And from that place, the mind clearly sees the whole body without moving from its seat. feeling the body with intense, clear, steady attention. And enjoying the intensity of the mind, enjoying the steadiness of the mind. And no matter what appears in the mind, whether it's a thought, an emotion, or a sensation, we know it as it comes, we know it as it goes. We don't try to stop anything. We don't try to hold on to anything. We just let the objects flow through the mind like water flowing through a riverbed. We just keep focused on our body with intense, steady awareness, undisturbed by whatever's flowing through the mind, uninterested in whatever flows through the mind. You can adjust your posture. So I'll start by paying homage to the Buddhas, and then give a Dhamma talk about emptiness. And then I'll take any questions that you have at the end. So feel free to type in questions at any time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So this evening, the topic that was selected was to talk about emptiness. And this is one of those subjects where it's very profound, it's very deep, and it's usually thought of as something very complicated, very complex. But when the Buddha explained it in the Pāli Canon, he actually explained it in very direct, simple words. So although the Mahayana texts on emptiness are, some of them are very long, hundreds of pages long even. In the Pāli Canon, the Buddhist explanations are actually quite short, quite to the point. And the main reason for this is because ultimately emptiness is something that we need to feel for ourselves. It's something to be experienced. If you just think about it, then you'll never understand it. You can write treatise after treatise on the nature of emptiness and not have the slightest inkling of what emptiness actually is. So one of the most succinct and direct explanations of emptiness is found in the Kaccanagotta Sutta. So I'll start by talking about how the Buddha explains it in that sutta, because this is, again, one of the shortest and clearest explanations I've seen anywhere. So anywhere in Theravada Suttas, Mahayana Sutras, in the explanations of any teacher since the time of the Buddha, the most clear and concise explanation I've ever seen is in the Kaccanagotta Sutta. So Samyutta Nikaya 12.15. So in the sutta, the Buddha quite simply states, he says that most people fall into one of two beliefs. They either believe that things exist or they believe that things don't exist. So this is our basic standpoint. And this actually is quite easy to understand. So you're looking at a camera and you think the camera exists. You're looking at a Buddha statue, you think the Buddha statue exists. You think about aliens and you think aliens don't exist. You're actually wrong on that point, but you might be thinking that aliens don't exist. Or you think about ghosts and you think ghosts don't exist. Again, wrong, but that might be what you think. Or you just think of it in terms of your direct experience. So like right here in this room, you might say, well, in this room, there exists some meditation cushions, some books. In this room, there does not exist an elephant. In this room, there does not exist a horse. In this room, there does not exist a car. You might have these kinds of thoughts. So relating to the world in terms of objects that either exist or don't exist. But the Buddha in the Kaccanagotta Sutta, he then goes on to say that it's only because people don't understand the nature of cessation that they think things exist. And it's only because they don't understand the nature of origination that they think that things, it's only because they don't understand the nature of cessation that they think things exist. And because they don't understand the nature of origination that they think things don't exist. In other words, we believe that whatever our current experience is absolute truth. We think that whatever our current experience is definitely, certainly the way things really are. So whatever currently seems to exist, we think that's definitely something real, solid, substantial. And whatever currently appears to us to not exist, we think, well, that's definitely not real, definitely doesn't exist, for sure. But the Buddha says one who clearly sees the nature of cessation doesn't believe that things exist. One who clearly sees the nature of origination, of arising, doesn't believe that things don't exist. In other words, one recognizes that everything that currently seems to exist is also of the nature of non-existence. And everything which seems to currently not exist is also of the nature of existence. In other words, whatever is currently present can disappear, and whatever is not currently present could appear. And the Buddha then goes on to say that there's these two extreme viewpoints. So one is the viewpoint sabbang atti, and the other is the viewpoint sabbang natti. So sabbang atti, the prefix, so sabbang atti, two words. So sabbang has two meanings. One is the meaning all or entire or completely. And the second word atti means it is or it exists. So sabbang atti then means it completely exists. It's totally real. And the other extreme wrong view that the Buddha points out is sabbang natti, saying it completely doesn't exist. It's completely not real. The word sabbang also has the meaning of all, like everything exists, versus the extreme wrong view, nothing whatsoever exists. But I think that the Buddha's meaning here is more in the sense of completely. So the belief either that things completely exist or that things completely don't exist. But the Buddha, again, in the Kaccanagotta Sutta, he then goes on to point out that things appear to exist under certain conditions, and they appear to not exist under other conditions. This is a very brief summary of Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination. Briefly speaking, Paticca Samuppada is saying that under certain conditions, things will appear to exist, and under other conditions, they will seem to not exist. This is the summary of Paticca Samuppada, which is it's called idappaccayata, specific conditionality. So when this is, that is. When this arises, that arises. When this is not, that is not. When this ceases, that ceases. So specific conditionality, idappaccayata in Pali. So what the Buddha is pointing to here then is that we can have an experience of an object which seems completely real, completely solid, definitely, absolutely, genuinely existent. But that's just an experience. It's not the way things really are. Similarly, we're also having an experience of many things not currently existing, many things that don't currently seem to be present. But that doesn't mean that those things are completely non-existent. It just means that they're not currently apparent. They're not currently appearing within the scope of our experience. So ultimately, what we're looking at then is the nature of experience. So within experience, objects might appear to exist or they might appear to not exist. But that's just an experience. It's not the way things necessarily really are. So an example of this is from children. When children are first trying to figure out how the world works, one of the behaviors that they sometimes display is they'll cover their eyes on the belief that if they don't see something, then that means it doesn't exist. So this belief, like if it's not currently appearing to my mind, therefore it's not real. It doesn't exist. And unfortunately, this is not just the behavior of children, it's the behavior of every single unenlightened being. If something is not currently appearing within the scope of our experience, then we think it's not real. And conversely, if something is appearing within the scope of our current experience, we think it's real, which is clearly demonstrated, for example, in dreams. When we're having a dream, unless you're having a lucid dream, but generally speaking, when you're having a dream, the objects that are appearing in the dream seem completely real to you, as though it's really happening. Things will feel solid. They will feel sharp or smooth, hot or cold. They'll feel pleasurable or painful. It all seems very real. And usually during dreams, no matter how bizarre and unrealistic the dreams are, we still accept them as reality while it's happening. And this is a very important point to keep in mind as you're going through your daily life. That currently you're accepting your experience as being completely, definitely real. But a few hours ago, when you were asleep and dreaming, you were having some absolutely bizarre, unrealistically weird experience that you also believed was completely real at the time. And it was only when you woke up from that dream that you realized it was just a dream. But nonetheless, at the time, it felt completely real. So right now, we have an experience that feels completely real. But is it? Is it completely real? Not necessarily. In fact, the Buddha quite clearly states, no, it's not. It's not real. It's not completely solidly real. And yet, something appears to be happening. So what we can say then, you can't quite say that things exist, but you can say that under certain conditions, things can appear to exist. And under other conditions, they appear to not exist. So now we're approaching finally the concept of emptiness. So what is the ultimate nature of any object whatsoever? It does not have the nature of existence, nor does it have the nature of non-existence. Or you can say it has both the nature of existence and the nature of non-existence. It's kind of like a coin. If you have a coin, let's say you have a coin that's blue on one side and red on the other side. Well, if you look at it from one side, you'll say, well, that's a blue coin. It's definitely blue. You look at it from the other side and you'll say, oh, it's a red coin. It's definitely red. So what is it? Is it a blue coin or is it a red coin? Well, it all depends upon what perspective you're looking at it from. From one perspective, it will seem blue, and from the other perspective, it will seem red. But actually, it might be more accurate to say that it's both. But that's also not quite correct. And it's also not quite correct to say that it's neither. The most accurate statement would be to say that from one angle, it seems to be blue, and from another angle, it seems to be red. So this is the same with all phenomena. So all phenomena, any particular phenomenon, from one perspective will seem to exist, and from another perspective will seem to not exist. Under some conditions, it will appear. Under other conditions, it will seem to not appear. But what is its nature itself? Its own nature is emptiness, like a mirage, like an illusion, like something which has the potential to exist, something which can seem real. But is it in and of itself? Another way that we talk about emptiness is in terms of relationships between things. So one of the ways the Buddha talks about emptiness in the Pāli Canon is that all things are empty of self-existence. They don't have any self-nature or anything related to a self-nature. So in other words, they don't exist in and of themselves. Their existence is only in terms of their relationship to other things. So just as an experiment, try to describe an object without making any reference to anything else whatsoever. And very quickly, you'll discover this is impossible. So for example, right now I'm looking at a yellow meditation cushion. Sounds like a pretty accurate description. Yellow meditation cushion. 3 words that describe it pretty accurately. Well, what is yellow? Describe yellow without making any references to any other color. Cushion. What is a cushion? Describe cushion without making reference to any other kind of object. Gets pretty challenging, doesn't it? Inevitably, you start defining things in terms of other things. A dictionary is a great example of this, by the way. How does a dictionary define words? By referring to other words. It never actually defines any particular word. What it does is it simply points to other words. So through creating a network of interrelated concepts, then you get the intended meaning of any particular word. But that word only has meaning within the context of all the other words that it's connected to. So ultimately, a dictionary only makes sense if you have the entire dictionary. If you only had one word, or even the definition of one word, that won't do you any good whatsoever. So imagine you're trying to learn a new language, a language which is completely unrelated to any language that you know. So maybe you grew up speaking French and now you're learning Chinese, so completely unrelated language. So you get a Chinese dictionary and you look up the meaning of one word, like the word 现在, so one Chinese word. And you read the definition. The definition is also in Chinese. Is that going to help you at all? No. I'll give you the answer. So, cheating for you. No, it won't help you one bit. You'll just have a definition with more words that you don't know. It's just more, it will just seem like gibberish, like nonsense. So it's only with understanding many, many, many different words and the relationship between all of those words that you start to form an understanding of each individual word. So it's the same with any object. In order to understand any object, you need to understand how it relates to other objects. In and of itself, any particular object has no meaning whatsoever. It cannot even be described, let alone understood. Only in terms of its relationship to other objects can it be understood. So this is another way of understanding emptiness. It's that no thing exists in and of itself, but rather things only seem to exist in terms of their relationship to other things. I should also clarify, by the way, that although I'm using words like object and thing, that's not constricted to the physical world. It also includes any mental object. So any mental phenomenon as well is also encompassed in these words. So then ultimately, the practice here is to come to a direct perception of emptiness, a direct feeling of it. So normally, our mind falls into the extreme viewpoints of complete existence and complete non-existence. So we think the meditation cushion is completely real, and we think ghosts are completely unreal, for example. But actually, neither statement is ultimately true. It's just something that appears to be true under our current conditions. So then, rather than seeing the meditation cushion as completely real, drop the concept of cushion, drop even the concept of existing, and see what's left. What's left when you drop all the concepts? What's left when you drop all the beliefs? What's left when you stop projecting the idea of objects onto the world? What's left? then you'll finally start to get a sense as to what emptiness is really talking about. And you'll start to get a sense of this vast web of formless potential, this vast field of formless potential, unshaped, unclaimed, uncontrolled, uncontrollable, and yet completely still, completely silent, interpenetrating all phenomena, inseparable from all phenomena. You might call it the raw clay from which all objects are formed. Yet in and of itself, it has no shape, no substance. And usually it's quite challenging to go directly to the perception of emptiness. So normally we go through intermediate stages along the way. And one of the more direct ways of getting there is through the perception of impermanence. So starting with developing strong mindfulness and concentration, such as through mindfulness of the body, then develop the recognition of impermanence. So recognizing that everything within our physical experience is constantly changing. And everything within our mental experience is also constantly changing. So everything in body-mind and our entire domain of experience is constantly changing. Therefore, it's all insubstantial. And you can directly perceive its insubstantiality. You can directly perceive the mist-like quality to all experience. And then you're starting to perceive the underlying emptiness of phenomena. And it's important to also clarify. So emptiness is a very literal translation of the word suññata. But it's important to clarify that emptiness does not mean nothingness. It doesn't mean absence of things, because that would be the wrong view of sabbang natti, the wrong view that of complete non-existence, the wrong view that there's absolutely nothing whatsoever. So that's not emptiness. But at the same time, emptiness is unshaped, it's unformed, it's unborn, it's unconditioned. It's not in any particular shape or form. So you can't say that there's any particular substantial real object to be found there. So sometimes we say emptiness is completely full, in the sense that it's completely full of the limitless potential to be anything whatsoever. It's completely full. So emptiness is completely full in the sense that there is every single phenomena, all phenomena have the nature of emptiness, and emptiness has the nature of all phenomena. Again, it's like clay. Clay can be shaped into any object, and every one of those objects has the nature of clay. But the clay itself is not any particular shape. And any particular shape, the shape itself, does not communicate the idea of clay. So for example, if you shape clay into a little statue of a cat, and then you start talking about a cat, well, a cat is not communicating the idea of clay, it's communicating the idea of a cat. Similarly, if you just talk about clay, well, that's not communicating the idea of cat. So it's when it's shaped into a particular object that it takes on the characteristics of that object. So we're looking then at this underlying, pervasive formlessness, shapelessness, this potential to be any shape, but not locked into any shape, which is, again, directly tangible. Through cultivating the perception of impermanence, one can start to get in touch with this. Another meditation method which approaches it very directly, but is also very difficult to do correctly, is animitta samadhi, so objectless concentration, which in the Chan schools is called silent illumination practice. Or in some schools they call it meditation on the middle way, or meditation on the reality of the middle way, which is actually a reference back to Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination. So in this practice, one simply drops the perception of all objects. And in this way, one naturally becomes aware of the underlying texture of emptiness that pervades and interpenetrates all phenomena. And through doing so, one recognizes that there is nothing to crave because there are no objects. Therefore, you can't crave any object. There's nothing to hate because there's no objects. Therefore, you can't hate any objects. And ultimately, there's nothing to identify as oneself because there are no objects on which to pin the label of self. So through cultivating the perception of impermanence, one naturally starts to drop away desire and aversion. And ultimately, one naturally starts to drop self-identity. So in this way, one then approaches awakening. One approaches the direct realization of anatta, of not self, of the impersonal nature of all phenomena. And the relinquishment of self-identity is the critical component of awakening. It's synonymous with awakening. So recognizing that all throughout the infinite spectrum of experience, the infinite spectrum of potential phenomena, potential realities, potential experiences, nothing whatsoever in any of it can be said to be me or mine. So this is ultimately the truth that a Buddha awakens to. It's ultimately the truth that any arhat directly perceives. So those are just a few words on the topic of emptiness. So this is a very important topic in Buddhism, and one that I quite enjoy talking about, but I don't actually speak about it directly that often. So I remember several years ago, I'd been giving a series of Dhamma talks in New York City. And at one point I started giving some talks about emptiness. And this one person who'd been coming to the classes, they said to me, "Oh, Bhante, I used to really like your Dhamma talks, but recently they just don't make sense anymore." And I was like, it's not that the Dhamma talks don't make sense. It's that it's talking about something which is extremely difficult to grasp intellectually. It's something which is beyond our normal scope of thinking, because normally we think in very sharp dualistic terms. As the Buddha said in the Kachanagota Sutta, we normally think in the sharp dualistic terms that either something is real or it's not real. Either it exists or it doesn't exist. And the Buddha says that that kind of black and white thinking is completely unrealistic. And in fact, it's why we're not enlightened yet. It's because we're still thinking in terms of existence and non-existence. And this also is why it's so difficult to comprehend emptiness. Because in order to apprehend emptiness, it's necessary that we drop our belief in existence and non-existence. It's necessary that we drop our belief that an object can be real, or drop our belief that just because we're not experiencing something, that therefore it can't be real. So ultimately, it's through meditation practice that one comes to understand emptiness. The intellectual investigation of it will only ever scratch the surface. It's only through deep meditation experience with emptiness that one starts to really understand what it is. So through feeling the emptiness of one's own body-mind, then one starts to grasp what the Buddha was talking about. So I think I'll go ahead and end at this time. I see a few questions, so we'll start with ending the talk with 3 sadhus, and then I'll go through the questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello to all the people joining in. Hello to Gita, Kumu, Janaki, Naranjan, Mary, Patricia, Amaranta, Jayanta, Barua, Tongkam, Suki, John, Sud, Elaine, Kevin, Putrika, Bidi, Manohari, Cooper, Jenny, Ajahn Pandit, hello, Bhante, good to see you. Cam, Marielle, Modern Contemplative, I believe that's Bhante Nalika. So hello, Bhante, good to see you too. And Will Val, so lots of people joining in, good to see all of you. And let's have a look at the questions. So Cooper says, this is the sound after the electricity goes out. I don't understand what you mean. Maybe if you could explain what you mean by that. I'm not sure if that's meant to be a metaphor or what. So if you could explain, I'll help. Bhante Pandit says, sutta links would help. Yes, I agree. I'll dig up a sutta link later. But again, Samyutta Nikaya 12.15. I'll put that in the comments. So you can look that up on suttacentral.net if you like. It's also on my website. Gita asks, Bhante, are there two types of reality, one conventional, two unconventional? Is unconventional reality somehow related to emptiness? We use labeling in conventional reality. Is this correct? So I think the terms you're referring to are the ideas of conventional truth versus absolute truth. So conventional truth, actually this is summed up in one of the suttas where a group of devas came to the Buddha and they actually were criticizing the Buddha. They were saying, oh, you and your monks are always talking about not self, there is no me, there is no mine. But then you say things like, I am getting up to get my robe. So clearly you're all hypocrites. And the Buddha replies by saying that we use words like I and me and mine for the sake of communication. But we understand that ultimately they have no meaning. Otherwise, it gets quite awkward. You say, well, the 5 khandas are standing up. The 5 khandas are approaching the robe. The 5 khandas are putting on the robe. Well, actually, you couldn't even say that. You would be saying the 5 khandas are moving towards another group of khandas. And then eventually you wind up just being incapable of communication altogether. So saying there is a monk and there is a robe and there is meditation and there is the path, this is all conventional truth. And we use conventional truth as a way of coming to an understanding of absolute truth. So absolute truth is emptiness. Absolute truth is the Nibbana Dhatu. And these two terms are effectively synonymous. And yeah, we use labeling and conventional truth because, again, otherwise it's really difficult to get by in life. It becomes nearly impossible to communicate or to achieve anything. So we use labels because they're useful, but it's important to understand that fundamentally they're meaningless. They're not referring to any genuine, real object. They're just concepts in our mind that we use in order to navigate our delusional experience. And then Gita asks, what is the difference between emptiness and nibbana, the unconditioned? So emptiness is itself unconditioned. It's the asankata. It has no sankharas. So in this sense, emptiness is synonymous with the nibbana dhatu, the element of the unconditioned. They're effectively the same thing. And BD asks, how to get happy from emptiness? Well, through recognizing that there's nothing whatsoever to crave, nothing whatsoever to detest, and nothing whatsoever which can affect you because there is no you to be affected, then the mind becomes extraordinarily peaceful, serene, and blissful. So it's the happiness of invincibility. The only way to be truly invincible is to completely drop your self-identity. Then there's nothing whatsoever that can be harmed. The way for you to be immune to all harm, to all suffering, is for there to be no you whatsoever. And there already is no you whatsoever. It's just a matter of recognizing that truth. And Janaki asks, existence is only a dream and Buddha has awakened from the dream of existence, isn't it? That's one way of talking, yeah. That's one reason why we call him Buddha. So Buddha means awake. So he's woken up from the dream that the rest of us were in. Will Val asks, can you please explain the relationship between emptiness and compassion? Well, one way this is explained is that through emptiness, one recognizes that all beings are identical to oneself, and oneself is inseparable from all beings. So when you look at any person, you're just seeing a reflection of yourself. It's like looking at a mirror. So naturally, one has deep compassion for every being you encounter. Piyal and Indira ask, is perception of solidity Gana Sanya? I don't know this term, Gana Sanya. That might be from the commentaries or something. Is perception of solidity the main hindrance to realizing emptiness? Perception of solidity is something which can be very useful for developing samadhi, but ultimately it does need to be dropped because the nature of things is that they're not solid. So perception of solidity is definitely a hindrance to realizing emptiness, but it can be useful in the very beginning. So when you're still trying to develop samadhi, for example, if you're focusing on your body, it's very helpful to perceive your body as a solid object. That will help the mind to solidify and stabilize. But then once the mind is solidified and stabilized, then it's important to then perceive the body as it actually is, which is insubstantial. Kevin asks, what's the Pali word for emptiness? The word is suññata. So very similar to the Sanskrit word shunyata. So very slight difference in pronunciation, but they're fundamentally the same word. Sud asks, how should one take this practice of emptiness to eliminate sensual desire? When you recognize that whatever you're desiring is ultimately insubstantial, then one's desire fades away naturally. But realistically, it's actually easier. It's easier to start by removing sensual desire from the mind and then practice emptiness. In fact, that's how the Buddha talks about it, I believe in the Mahasunyata Sutta, though I would need to look up on it. I think the Buddha talks about first purifying the mind of sensual desire and aversion. Yeah. Yeah, and then after one has discarded interest in sensual experience, then one directs one's mind towards impermanence. And in so doing, one starts to recognize the emptiness of phenomena. So you can discard sensual desire through the perception of emptiness, but it usually works better the other way around. Start by reducing your desire, and then perceiving emptiness becomes substantially easier. As long as you're still attached to the concept of an object that you want, then it will be very difficult for you to let go of the perception of objects. So this is the problem. We're like, well, I really love pizza, so I can't let go of the perception of pizza. Well, then you will never immerse your mind fully in the perception of emptiness, because you'll always be trying to hold on to the concept of pizza or whatever it is you're craving. It doesn't really matter. You can replace pizza with any object and the effect is the same. Kevin asks, is emptiness and not self synonymous? I've always thought of them as the same, but now I have some doubt. Yeah, they are in fact effectively synonymous, as long as you understand that not self is talking about all phenomena. So all phenomena are not self. So not just body, mind, but all objects whatsoever. All of them have no self-existence. Then you'll recognize this. So this is the distinction of, in certain Mahayana texts, they go into a bit more detail on this, the distinction between emptiness of, how do they describe it? I think it's like emptiness of self-identity versus emptiness of phenomena. So emptiness of self-identity is you think that object is not me, but that object still has absolute real existence of some sort. Whereas emptiness of phenomena is you recognize that the object is not me and the object has no self-existence of any kind. So this is a more refined point. But ultimately, emptiness and not self are talking about the same thing. If you realize one, you realize the other. Then Sebastian asks, why do people feel so good with the atta idea? Is the teaching of the Buddha for everyone? Why do people feel so good with the atta idea? And ultimately, the thing that people are the most addicted to is themselves, and belief that they are a unique individual. Belief in I am. This is what people are completely addicted to. And actually, it doesn't feel good. It actually feels horrible. But we're addicted to it, so we can't seem to stop. And is the teaching of the Buddha for everyone? No. It's only for people who want to attain awakening. That's all. If you want anything else, then the teachings of the Buddha are not particularly relevant to you. He did also talk about the path to heaven and the path to a ordinary positive rebirth. He did talk about how to do such things. But that's not unique to Buddhism. That's present in countless spiritual systems. What's unique to Buddhism is the path to awakening. So that's what the teaching of the Buddha is really for. So if you're not interested in awakening, then the teachings of the Buddha are not necessarily going to be of much interest to you. BD asks, how would you describe emptiness to a normie? I assume here that normie is an abbreviation for normal person. How would you describe emptiness to a normie? That's what I've been trying to do for the past 45 minutes. So this was possibly the least scholastic way of talking about emptiness. I actually don't know any easier way to describe it than how I've been describing it. So if this didn't help, then practice the perception of impermanence. So cultivate strong samadhi and practice the perception of impermanence for 5 or 10 years. I'm not kidding. Then the concept of emptiness becomes much more clear. I actually didn't really understand emptiness until I had practiced a lot of deep meditation on impermanence. And then I started to finally grasp what emptiness was talking about. But it's helpful to first see the impermanence of all phenomena. Once you recognize that nothing whatsoever is solid or substantial, then the perception of emptiness becomes much more accessible. That's the last of the questions from online. Anything from the residents here? Yeah, go ahead.
Bhante, what are your recommendations in my own practice? When my mind is approaching, or when it feels like it's approaching the concept of emptiness, either it becomes like overexcited, or there's my mind immediately pulls away from it. I think going to that question of addiction, like there's that addiction of self, and so the mind is so, like, it becomes so, for lack of a better word, scared or doesn't want to let go of that idea of self. When that emptiness approaches in the mind, my mind immediately pulls away. So I was wondering if you have any recommendations for that, or one that occurs in meditation.
I do have a recommendation, but you're not going to like it. So I'm going to quote Master Sheng Yen on this one. just relax.
Mm.
So he emphasizes over and over and over again, relax, 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 just relax. So just a peaceful acceptance. This is just the way things are.
Mm.
Emptiness is just the way things are.
Mm.
So we just peacefully relax into it. It's like, this is how it is. Okay. You give up wanting it to be any different, because it's not going to be any different. It never was and it never will be.
Mm.
So just relax into a peaceful acceptance of how it is. Okay?
Thank you.
And BD asks, what object gave you good impermanent samadhi or realization of emptiness? Impermanent samadhi, mindfulness of the body. I really cannot overemphasize how radically life transforming the simple practice of mindfulness of the body for sati and samadhi, followed by anicca sanya, recognition of impermanence, for developing vipassana. So this simple couplet of meditation methods has radically transformed my life. It's just amazing how deeply this will alter your experience of reality. And after you've gone sufficiently deep with that, then emptiness becomes something you can access as a perception. So it's theoretically possible to access the perception of emptiness without going through impermanence, but it's so much easier if you start with impermanence. And impermanence is easier if you start with a nice, apparently solid object, such as the body. So that's the last of the questions. So a number of people are expressing their gratitude. So I'm really happy that this was helpful. And I hope that you'll continue joining in for our ongoing live streams. So hopefully we'll see you all again soon. So we'll end the evening with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.